A 19-year-old girl walked into a Mediterranean villa thinking she'd save her father's business. Instead, she discovered he'd sold her to pay his debts. The man waiting wasn't just any creditor, he was Vittorio Salazar, Europe's most feared crime lord, 50 years her senior. His offer was brutal: become his wife or watch her father die. Trapped in a foreign country with no escape, Lena Whitmore faced the choice that would define her life. What began as captivity would become something far more dangerous, something that felt almost like freedom. If you're hooked, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. The plane touched down in Rome just after sunset, painting the runway in shades of amber and blood. Lena pressed her forehead against the window, watching Italy unfold beneath her like a postcard she'd never asked to receive. The eternal city sprawled in golden light, ancient and beautiful and utterly foreign. Her reflection stared back at her, 19 years old, dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail, eyes shadowed with exhaustion from the overnight flight from Boston. She'd never been to Europe before. Never been anywhere, really, but her father had sounded so desperate on the phone. "I need you here, Lena. Please. The business, everything's falling apart. I can't explain over the phone, but I need you. Just trust me." Michael Whitmore had never been good at asking for help. He'd raised Lena alone after her mother died, working himself half to death to keep their small import company afloat. When he'd moved to Italy 3 years ago to expand operations, Lena had stayed behind to finish high school, then started community college. They'd grown apart. Phone calls became emails. Emails became texts. But when he called last week, his voice cracking with something that sounded like fear, Lena had booked the first flight she could afford. Now, as she collected her single suitcase from baggage claim and stepped into the humid Roman evening, doubt crept through her chest like cold water. A man in a black suit held a sign with her name on it. "Miss Whitmore?" His English was perfect, his expression unreadable. "That's me," Lena said, gripping her suitcase handle tighter. "I'm here to take you to your father. The car is waiting." The Mercedes was sleek and black, windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. The driver opened his door without a word. Lena hesitated, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. But what choice did she have? She slid into the back seat. The drive took over an hour, leaving Rome's glittering chaos behind for winding roads that climbed into the hills. Vineyards stretched across the landscape, orderly rows disappearing into twilight. Beautiful, isolated. "Where exactly are we going?" Lena asked. The driver's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "To the estate." "What estate?" "My father works in imports. He has an office, not an estate." The driver said nothing. The silence felt like a hand closing around Lena's throat. When they finally stopped, it was in front of gates that belonged in a movie. Wrought iron, 15 feet tall, flanked by stone pillars topped with security cameras. Beyond them, a villa sprawled across a hilltop like a sleeping palace. Warm light glowed from dozens of windows. Gardens cascaded down the slopes in carefully manicured terraces. This wasn't her father's life. This was someone else's world entirely. The gates opened silently. The car rolled forward, tires crunching on gravel. "Wait," Lena said, heart hammering. "I want to see my father first, right now." "He's waiting inside." Two men in dark suits stood at the villa's entrance. They didn't smile, didn't speak. Just watched as Lena climbed out of the car, legs shaking beneath her jeans. The front doors opened before she could knock. A woman in her 60s appeared, elegant in a dove-gray dress, silver hair swept into a neat chignon. Her face was kind, but her eyes held something Lena couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe. "Miss Whitmore," the woman said softly. "Welcome. I am Signora Carrara. Please come inside. Your father is in the study." The interior was breathtaking, marble floors, soaring ceilings, art that probably cost more than Lena's entire education. It smelled like expensive flowers and old money, and secrets kept behind closed doors. Signora Carrara led her through hallways lined with paintings, past rooms filled with furniture that looked like it belonged in museums. Lena's sneakers squeaked against the polished floors. Finally, they stopped before a heavy wooden door. "He's inside," Signora Carrara said quietly, then even more quietly. "I'm sorry, child." Before Lena could ask what that meant, the woman opened the door and stepped aside. The study was all dark wood and leather, shelves lined with books in languages Lena didn't recognize. A fire crackled in an ornate fireplace despite the warm evening, and there, standing by the window with his back to her, was her father. Dad? Michael Whitmore turned. Lena barely recognized him. He'd always been lean, but now he looked skeletal. His suit hung loose on his frame. His face was gaunt, stubbled, eyes hollow with something that looked like grief or guilt. Lena, his voice cracked. You came. Of course I came. You sounded... Dad, what's going on? Whose house is this? He opened his mouth, closed it, looked away. Dad, you're scaring me. I'm sorry. The words came out as a whisper. I'm so sorry, baby girl. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could fix it. I thought... Fix what? The debts. Lena's blood went cold. What debts? The business failed 2 years ago. I borrowed money to keep it going. Then I borrowed more to pay back the first loans, then more. And then... He gestured helplessly at the room around them. Then I borrowed from people you don't walk away from. How much? 8 million euros. The number hit Lena like a physical blow. 8 million? Dad, that's impossible. How could you... I know. Tears streaked down his hollow cheeks. I know, I tried everything, sold everything. But they want their money, Lena. And when people like them don't get their money, people like who? The door behind her opened. Lena spun around. The man who entered moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd never had to raise his voice to command a room. He was tall, broad-shouldered despite his age, which Lena guessed at somewhere in his late 60s. Silver hair swept back from a face that might have been handsome once, but had been carved into something harder by time and choices she couldn't imagine. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. No tie. The top button of his white shirt was undone, but it was his eyes that stopped Lena's breath. Dark, intelligent, and utterly merciless. This was a man who had seen people beg for their lives. This was a man who had decided whether they lived or died. Vittorio, her father whispered. Please. She just got here. Give us... You've had 3 years, Michael. The man's voice was quiet, accented, and somehow more terrifying for its calmness. 3 years and 8 million euros of my patience. He looked at Lena, really looked at her, and Lena felt something shift in the air between them, some assessment happening in those dark eyes that she didn't understand but felt down to her bones. So this is your daughter? Wasn't a question. Don't, Michael said desperately. Please, Vittorio, she has nothing to do with this. She's innocent, just a kid who... She's 19. Vittorio's gaze never left Lena's face. Hardly a child. Who are you? Lena demanded, finding her voice even though her hands were shaking. What do you want? My name is Vittorio Salazar. Your father owes me a considerable sum of money he cannot repay. The name meant nothing to Lena, but the way her father flinched when he heard it told her everything she needed to know. Then make a payment plan, Lena said, lifting her chin even though fear crawled up her spine. People do that all the time, monthly installments or... I am not a bank, Miss Whitmore. Then what are you? Vittorio smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I am the man who decides whether your father lives or dies. And as of this moment, I have decided he will live. Relief flooded through Lena so suddenly she almost collapsed. Thank God. On one condition. The relief turned to ice. What condition? She whispered. Vittorio walked further into the room, moving past her to pour amber liquid from a crystal decanter into a glass. He took his time. Each second stretched like hours. Your father's debt is forgiven, he said finally, swirling the drink in his hand, in exchange for something of equal value. I don't have 8 million euros, Lena said desperately. I'm a college student. I work part-time at a coffee shop. I don't have anything worth... You have yourself. The world stopped. Lena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? You will marry me. The debt will be erased. Your father will live. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. You're joking. You have to be joking. I do not joke about business. I'm 19 years old. I'm aware. Lena looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the silver in his hair, the lines around his eyes. You're old enough to be my grandfather. Yes. The simple acknowledgement was somehow more horrifying than denial would have been. This is insane, Lena said, turning to her father. Dad, tell him this is insane. Tell him. But Michael Whitmore wouldn't meet her eyes. Dad! I'm sorry, he whispered. Lena, I'm so sorry. Understanding crashed over her like a wave. You knew. You knew this was why he wanted me here. Her father's silence was answer enough. You sold me. Lena's voice sounded strange in her own ears, distant, hollow. You brought me here and sold me to pay your debts. I had no choice. There's always a choice, Lena shouted, and suddenly she was crying, tears burning hot down her cheeks. You could have declared bankruptcy. You could have gone to the police. You could have... The police? Vittorio's laugh was soft and terrible. Miss Whitmore, I own half the police in this region. Your father came to me because banks wouldn't loan him money. He stayed with me because he had nowhere else to go. And now, he set down his glass. Now I'm offering him mercy. A mercy he doesn't deserve. By forcing me to marry you? By giving you a choice. That's not a choice. Isn't it? Vittorio moved closer. Lena wanted to step back but refused to show fear. You can walk away right now. I'll have my driver take you back to Rome. You'll catch a flight home to America. You'll never see Italy again. Hope flickered in Lena's chest. Really? Really. Of course, your father will die before you reach the airport. Painfully, slowly, as a lesson to others about the cost of wasting my time. The hope died. But if you stay, Vittorio continued, if you marry me, he lives. You'll live. Quite comfortably, I assure you. As your prisoner. As my wife. What's the difference? Something flickered in Vittorio's eyes, too quick for Lena to read. You'll find out if you say yes. Lena looked at her father, the man who'd raised her, who'd taught her to ride a bike, who'd sat up with her through nightmares after her mother died, who'd worked double shifts to pay for her school supplies, the man who'd sold her to save his own worthless life. I hate you, she whispered. Michael Whitmore's face crumpled. I know. Lena turned back to Vittorio. If I say yes, you'll forgive the debt? All of it? All of it? And my father lives? He lives. What about me? What happens to me? You become my wife. You live in my home. You want for nothing, except freedom. Freedom is overrated, Vittorio said quietly. Ask your father. Lena wanted to scream, wanted to run, wanted to wake up in her cramped Boston apartment and discover this was all some nightmare brought on by bad takeout. But the man watching her with those merciless dark eyes was real. The debt was real. The choice was real. How long? She asked, voice barely audible. I'm sorry? How long do I have to stay married to you? Vittorio considered her for a long moment. Until death do us part. Isn't that the traditional vow? You can't be serious. I'm always serious about contracts, Miss Whitmore. Marriage is simply a contract with particularly binding terms. Lena's mind raced through possibilities, trying to find an escape route that didn't exist. She could run, but where? She was in a foreign country with no money, no contacts, no way home except through this man's mercy. She could fight, but the guards outside weren't decorative. She could refuse, but her father would die. And maybe he deserved to die. Maybe he'd earned it. But Lena couldn't live with that weight, couldn't spend the rest of her life knowing she'd let him be killed, even if he'd betrayed her in the worst possible way. What do you want from me? She asked desperately. Why me? You could marry anyone, someone your own age, someone who actually wants... I want a wife who won't scheme against me, Vittorio interrupted. Someone young enough to bear children, someone who owes me too much to ever betray me. Children? Lena's voice cracked. You expect me to? Eventually, when you're ready, I'm patient. You're insane. Perhaps. Do we have an agreement? Lena looked at her father one more time. He stood by the window, tears streaming down his face, hands shaking. She'd loved him once. Now she wasn't sure what she felt, but she couldn't let him die. If I say yes, she said slowly, I want it in writing, the debt forgiven, my father's safety guaranteed. Vittorio's eyebrows rose slightly. You negotiate? I'm not stupid. No, he agreed. You're not. Very well. My lawyer will draw up the papers, you'll have your guarantees. And I want to talk to my father, alone, before I decide. You have 5 minutes. Vittorio walked to the door, each step deliberate. He paused at the threshold, looking back at her. For what it's worth, Miss Whitmore, I don't expect you to love me. I don't even expect you to like me. I simply expect you to be my wife. Everything else is negotiable. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Lena turned on her father. How could you? Michael Whitmore collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. I didn't know what else to do. He was going to kill me, Lena. He had men at my apartment. I was so scared, and then he suggested, he said what? That he'd been watching you, that he'd seen photos of you, that you were exactly what he needed. Bile rose in Lena's throat. You gave him photos of me? Social media. He found your social media accounts. And you didn't warn me? Didn't tell me to run, to hide, to do literally anything except get on a plane straight to him? He said if you didn't come willingly, he'd take you anyway. Her father looked up, eyes red. This way. At least you have a choice. This isn't a choice. This is extortion. I know, and I'm sorry. But Lena, his voice dropped to a desperate whisper. He's not what you think. Vittorio Salazar, he's not just some gangster. He runs everything. Politicians, judges, police. Half of Europe's underground economy flows through his hands. If you run, he'll find you. If you refuse, he'll make an example of both of us. Then maybe we should let him. Lena, please. Did you even try? She demanded. Did you try to fix this any other way? Or did you just immediately agree to sell your daughter like she was a used car? Michael flinched. I tried. I swear I tried. But he wanted you. Once Vittorio Salazar decides he wants something, he gets it, one way or another. So you just gave up. I chose your life over my pride. You chose your life over my freedom. They stared at each other across the beautiful room in the beautiful villa that had become a beautiful cage. Finally, Lena asked the question that mattered most. If I marry him, what happens to you? The debt is forgiven. I can go home. To America? If that's what you want. What Lena wanted was to never see her father's face again, but she also wanted him alive because the alternative, his blood on her hands, his death on her conscience, was unbearable. I'll do it, she heard herself say. I'll marry him. Lena, on one condition. You go back to Boston. You never contact me again. You live whatever life you've earned, but you live it far away from me. Pain crossed Michael Whitmore's face. You're my daughter. No, I was your daughter. Now I'm just the price you paid to save your own skin. A knock at the door interrupted them. Vittorio entered without waiting for permission. His dark eyes moved from Lena to her father and back again. Have you decided, Miss Whitmore? Lena straightened her spine, met his gaze without blinking. I'll marry you, under 3 conditions. I don't typically negotiate terms. First, my father's debt is completely erased. All paperwork destroyed. He goes free. Vittorio nodded slowly. Agreed. Second, you never hurt him. No matter what happens between us, you leave him alone. Agreed. Third, Lena swallowed hard. You give me time. Before you expect anything physical, I need time. Something shifted in Vittorio's expression, too subtle to read. How much time? I don't know, months, maybe longer. A year, Vittorio said. I'll give you 1 year before I expect the marriage to be complete. After that, you fulfill all the duties of a wife. 1 year, 12 months before her life ended and this stranger's began. Okay, Lena whispered. Okay. We have a deal. Vittorio extended his hand. Then we have an agreement, Miss Whitmore. Lena looked at his hand, broad, scarred along the knuckles, steady as stone. This was it. The moment everything changed. She reached out and clasped his hand. His grip was firm but not crushing. His skin was warm. He was real. This was real. The wedding will be in 3 days, Vittorio said. Signora Carrara will help you prepare. I suggest you rest tonight. The next few days will be demanding. He released her hand and turned to leave. Wait, Lena called. He paused. Why me? She asked. Really? Why not someone who actually wants this? Vittorio was quiet for a long moment. Because, Miss Whitmore, I'm tired of women who want me for my power. I'd rather have a wife who wants me despite it, or who doesn't want me at all. At least then I know where I stand. He left without another word. Lena stood in the study, hands still tingling from his touch, and realized she'd just agreed to spend the rest of her life with a man whose motives she couldn't even begin to understand. Signora Carrara appeared in the doorway. Come, child, I'll show you to your room. The room turned out to be a suite larger than Lena's entire Boston apartment. Cream-colored walls, antique furniture, a four-poster bed draped in silk. French doors opened onto a balcony overlooking gardens that glowed with subtle lighting. It was beautiful. It was a prison. There are clothes in the wardrobe, Signora Carrara said gently. Tomorrow we'll have the seamstress come for your measurements. The wedding dress will need to be perfect. I don't want a perfect dress. Nevertheless, you'll have one. The older woman's voice softened. I know this seems impossible now, but Signor Salazar is not a cruel man. Demanding, yes. Ruthless in his business, but not cruel. Not to those who belong to him. I don't belong to anyone. Not yet, perhaps. In 3 days you will. After Signora Carrara left, Lena walked onto the balcony and gripped the iron railing until her knuckles turned white. The Italian countryside spread before her in darkness, punctuated by distant lights. Beautiful. Foreign. Inescapable. She thought about jumping, thought about running, but she'd made a promise. And despite everything, despite the betrayal, the fear, the impossible situation, Lena Whitmore kept her promises, even the ones that destroyed her. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparations that felt like a countdown to execution. Seamstresses came and went, pinning fabric around Lena's body while she stood like a mannequin. The dress was beautiful, ivory silk, vintage lace, fitted perfectly to her frame. She hated it. Signora Carrara taught her basic Italian phrases, table manners, how to move through Vittorio's world without embarrassing him. You'll meet many people, the older woman explained. Politicians, businessmen, others in Signor Salazar's circle. They will judge you. They will look for weakness. Let them look. Child, you must understand, in this world, weakness gets you killed. Lena learned to set a formal table, learned which wine paired with which course, learned to walk in heels without stumbling. She learned everything except how to stop feeling like she was drowning. Vittorio appeared occasionally, a shadow in doorways, watching her lessons with those unreadable dark eyes. He never spoke to her, never approached, just watched, like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. The wedding was set for Saturday afternoon in the villa's private chapel. Small, Vittorio had said. Just witnesses and essential guests. No family, no friends. No one who actually cared whether Lena Whitmore lived or died. The night before the wedding, she couldn't sleep. She stood on her balcony at 2 a.m, watching moonlight paint the garden silver, and wondered if this was what drowning felt like. Slow, inevitable. You should rest. Lena spun around. Vittorio stood in the doorway to her room, still dressed despite the late hour. Dark slacks, white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. What are you doing here? She demanded. This is my home. I go where I please. This is supposed to be my room. For now, after tomorrow, we'll share a room. Lena's heart hammered. You said I had a year. I said you had a year before I expect the marriage to be complete. I didn't say anything about sleeping in separate beds. He moved on to the balcony, keeping a careful distance. I'm not going to force myself on you, Miss Whitmore, but we will share a room. We will share a bed. People will watch. They'll look for signs of weakness in our marriage. This isn't a marriage. It's a transaction. All marriages are transactions. This one is simply more honest about it. Lena turned away, gripping the railing again. I hate this. I hate you. I hate my father. I hate everything about this situation. Good. She blinked. Good? Hate is honest. Hate is real. I can work with hate. Vittorio moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not touching. What I can't work with is false affection. Lies meant to manipulate. I've had enough of those to last several lifetimes. Well, so you married a teenager instead. I married a woman who had no choice, which means when you finally do choose to stay with me, if you ever do, I'll know it's real. Lena laughed bitterly. You think I'll choose this? Choose you? Maybe. Maybe not. Time will tell. They stood in silence, watching the moonlit gardens. Finally, Lena asked the question that had been haunting her. What happened to your last wife? Vittorio was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. She died, he said finally. Cancer, 5 years ago. Did you love her? I thought I did. She certainly loved my money. And when she died? I discovered she'd been stealing from me, funneling information to competitors, planning to leave with millions of my money. His voice was flat, emotionless. She died before she could. Perhaps that was for the best. That's horrible. That's reality. In my world, love is a liability. Trust is a weapon. The only thing that matters is control. Then why get married again at all? Vittorio looked at her then, really looked at her, and Lena saw something she hadn't expected in his eyes. Loneliness. Because I'm tired of being alone, he said quietly, and because I want children, legitimate heirs, a family built on something more solid than lies. So you bought one? Yes. At least he was honest. Tomorrow, Vittorio continued, you'll walk down that aisle and say vows you don't mean to a man you despise. You'll smile for the witnesses, you'll wear my ring, and then we'll begin the process of building whatever this becomes. A prison? A partnership, if you're smart enough to see the opportunity. What opportunity? You're about to become one of the most protected women in Europe. You'll have resources most people only dream about. Education, training, access to power you can't begin to imagine. He turned to face her fully. You can spend the rest of your life hating me and wasting all of it, or you can learn to use what I'm offering you. To do what? Whatever you want, within reason. Lena studied his face, trying to find the lie. But Vittorio Salazar didn't seem like a man who bothered lying. I want to go to university, she said finally. A real one. Study literature, maybe. Or art history. Done. I'll arrange enrollment after the wedding. I want to learn Italian, properly. You'll have the best tutors. Lena hesitated. I want to matter, not just be some trophy wife hidden away. Vittorio's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. Careful, Miss Whitmore. That sounds dangerously close to ambition. Maybe it is. Good. I can work with ambition too. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Tomorrow, when you walk down that aisle, remember this. Every person in that chapel will be watching for signs of your weakness. Tears, hesitation, fear. They'll see it all as proof you don't belong beside me. I don't belong beside you. Not yet. But if you want to survive in my world, you need to look like you do. Hold your head high. Don't flinch. Show them steel instead of tears. Why do you care what they think? Because respect is currency in my business. And if they don't respect you, they won't respect me, which makes us both vulnerable. Then maybe you shouldn't have forced a teenager to marry you. Vittorio's eyes hardened. I didn't force you. I gave you a choice. That's not a choice. It's more than most people in my position would offer. Be grateful for small mercies, Miss Whitmore. He left without waiting for a response. Lena stood alone on the balcony until dawn crept across the sky, painting everything in shades of rose and gold. Tomorrow she would become Lena Salazar. Tomorrow, her life as she knew it would end. She didn't sleep at all. The wedding day arrived with cruel sunshine and cloudless blue skies. Signora Carrara appeared at 8 with breakfast Lena couldn't eat and began preparations that felt like dressing a body for burial. The dress fit perfectly. The veil was imported lace, delicate as spiderweb. The shoes were Italian leather, expensive and uncomfortable. Lena looked at herself in the mirror and saw a stranger. Beautiful, Signor Carrara whispered. Like a princess. More like a sacrifice, Lena thought. At 3 o'clock, precisely on schedule, someone knocked on her door. Not her father. Vittorio had made it clear Michael Whitmore wasn't invited to the ceremony. Instead, a young man in an elegant suit offered his arm. "I'm Marco, Signor Salazar's nephew. I'll be escorting you." His English was accented but perfect. His smile was kind. "Did you volunteer for this?" Lena asked bitterly. "Or were you forced to babysit the purchased bride?" Marco's smile didn't waver. "I volunteered. My uncle is many things, but he's not cruel. If he chose you, there must be a reason." "Money. The reason is money." "If you believe that, you don't know him at all." They walked through the villa's corridors in silence. Through windows, Lena could see cars arriving, men in expensive suits, women dripping with jewelry. This was a business event, a merger, not a wedding. The chapel was small but stunning. Frescoed ceilings, marble floors, afternoon light streaming through stained glass windows. Perhaps 30 people filled the pews, all turning to watch as Lena appeared in the doorway. And at the altar, waiting with perfect stillness, stood Vittorio Salazar. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than a car. His silver hair was swept back. His dark eyes tracked every step as Lena walked down the aisle on Marco's arm. She wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to wake up from this nightmare. But Vittorio's words echoed in her mind. Show them steel instead of tears. So Lena lifted her chin, straightened her spine, met her future husband's eyes without flinching. If they wanted to see a scared girl, they'd be disappointed. Marco placed her hand in Vittorio's at the altar and stepped back. The priest began speaking in Italian, words Lena barely understood. She'd been given her cues. When to speak, when to nod, when to kneel. She followed them mechanically, a puppet playing her role. When the priest asked her to repeat her vows, Lena's voice barely shook. When Vittorio slid the ring onto her finger, a band of platinum set with diamonds that caught the light like ice, his hands were steady. When the priest pronounced them married and Vittorio kissed her, it was brief, chaste, a seal on a contract, nothing more. The witnesses applauded. Lena Salazar smiled because smiling was expected and felt absolutely nothing. The reception was held in the villa's grand ballroom, all marble and crystal chandeliers and music that sounded like money. Lena stood beside Vittorio as an endless parade of people congratulated them, politicians kissing her hand, businessmen assessing her like livestock, women with calculating eyes trying to determine if she was a threat or a joke. "Vittorio, congratulations," one silver-haired man said in accented English, clearly for Lena's benefit. "She's exquisite, though perhaps a bit young to understand the complexities of your world." "She'll learn," Vittorio replied calmly. "I'm standing right here," Lena said pleasantly, "and I understand more than you think." The man blinked, surprised. Vittorio's hand tightened slightly on her waist, warning or approval, she couldn't tell. As the evening wore on, Lena learned to navigate the room. Smile. Nod. Answer questions without revealing anything real. She was dancing with a man whose name she'd already forgotten when she noticed the woman watching from across the room. Tall, elegant, perhaps 40, wearing a red dress that probably cost what Lena used to make in 6 months. Her eyes on Vittorio were hungry. "Don't mind Isabella," the man she was dancing with murmured. "She's been trying to catch Vittorio's attention for years. Your marriage must be quite disappointing for her." "How tragic," Lena said dryly. When the song ended, she made her way back to Vittorio's side. He was deep in conversation with 3 men, their discussion clearly about business she wasn't meant to hear. But when Lena appeared, Vittorio smoothly extracted himself and turned his full attention to her. "Tired?" he asked quietly. "Exhausted. We'll leave soon. 1 more hour." It was the longest hour of Lena's life. Finally, mercifully, Vittorio made their excuses. They were newlyweds, after all. People smiled knowingly as they left. Lena wanted to scream at them that it wasn't what they thought. The car ride back to Vittorio's private quarters was silent. When they arrived at the master suite, not Lena's room, but Vittorio's with its massive bed and masculine decor, Lena's breath caught. "I'll take the couch," Vittorio said, reading her panic. "You take the bed." I'm not sleeping on the couch in my own room," he interrupted. "But I promised you time. I keep my promises." He walked into the bathroom and closed the door. Lena stood alone in her wedding dress in a stranger's room and finally let herself break. She cried silently, tears soaking into expensive lace until she had nothing left. Then she cleaned her face, changed into the nightgown that had been laid out for her, and climbed into bed. When Vittorio emerged an hour later in sleep pants and nothing else, he didn't speak, just settled onto the couch with a blanket and closed his eyes. Lena lay in the darkness, listening to him breathe, and wondered how long she could survive this. One day, she told herself, just survive one day at a time. Lena woke to silence and unfamiliar shadows. For one blissful moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed down like a wave. The wedding, the vows, the ring still heavy on her finger. She was married to a man sleeping 10 feet away on a couch that was too small for his frame. Pale dawn light filtered through heavy curtains. Lena turned her head carefully, not wanting to wake him. Vittorio lay on his side, one arm tucked under his head, the blanket tangled around his waist. Even in sleep, he didn't look peaceful. His jaw was tight, his breathing controlled. A man who never fully surrendered, even to unconsciousness. Lena slipped out of bed as quietly as possible and moved to the bathroom. The marble floors were cold against her bare feet. The bathroom was larger than her old bedroom, all white stone and gold fixtures and a shower that could fit 6 people. She caught sight of herself in the mirror and stopped. Her hair was a mess. Her eyes were shadowed. The nightgown she wore was silk and lace and completely impractical, clearly chosen by someone who thought newlyweds would care about such things. She looked like a child playing dress-up. The closet has clothes that should fit you. Lena spun around. Vittorio stood in the doorway, fully dressed in charcoal slacks and a crisp white shirt. His hair was damp, which meant he'd used another bathroom while she slept. "How long have you been awake?" she asked. "Long enough. There's breakfast downstairs. You should eat." "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway. We have a long day ahead." "Doing what?" "Learning how to survive in my world." Vittorio left without waiting for a response. Lena found the closet he'd mentioned, a room unto itself, lined with clothes she definitely hadn't chosen. Designer labels, beautiful fabrics, everything in her size, all selected by someone else, for someone else's version of who she should be. She chose the simplest option, dark jeans, a cream sweater, and went downstairs. The dining room was less formal than she'd expected. Sunlight streamed through tall windows overlooking the gardens. Signora Carrara was setting out fresh bread, fruit, coffee that smelled like heaven. Vittorio sat at the head of the table, reading something on a tablet, a cup of espresso at his elbow. He glanced up when Lena entered. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Lena sat. Signora Carrara poured her coffee, offered her food. Lena took bread she didn't want and fruit that tasted like cardboard in her mouth. "Your Italian lessons continue today," Vittorio said without looking up from his tablet. "Also self-defense training." Lena blinked. "Self-defense? You're my wife now. That makes you a target. You need to know how to protect yourself." "A target for what?" "Kidnapping, leverage, violence." He said it casually, like discussing the weather. "People will try to use you to get to me. You need to be prepared." The bread turned to ash in Lena's mouth. "You're serious. Always. Maybe you should have mentioned that before forcing me to marry you." "Would it have changed your answer?" "No, because her father would still be in debt, still facing death." Lena said nothing. "Your trainer arrives at 10, Vittorio continued. "His name is Dmitri, former Russian Special Forces. He'll teach you to fight, to shoot, to think like someone trying to kill you." "How romantic." "Romance has nothing to do with survival." They ate in silence for several minutes. Lena watched Vittorio through her lashes, trying to understand this man she'd married. He moved with precision, every gesture deliberate, every action purposeful. Nothing wasted, like someone who'd learned early that weakness meant death. "What are you staring at?" he asked without looking up. "You. See anything interesting?" "I'm trying to figure out what kind of man buys a wife and then sleeps on a couch." Vittorio set down his tablet, met her eyes directly. "The kind who keeps his promises. I said I'd give you time. I meant it." "Why?" "Why what?" "Why keep that promise? You have me. You could do whatever you want. Who would stop you?" Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Is that what you think of me? That I'd force myself on a woman just because I could? You forced me into marriage. That's different. How? Marriage is a contract. Sex is... He paused, choosing words carefully. Sex requires participation, consent. Without that, it's violence. And I don't need violence to get what I want. Lena studied his face, looking for the lie. But Vittorio Salazar didn't seem like a man who lied to make himself look better. What do you want? She asked quietly. From you? From this. From us. What's the end goal here? Vittorio leaned back in his chair, considering her. A family, legitimate heirs, a partner who won't betray me the moment my back is turned. You don't think I'll betray you? I think you're too honest to hide it well if you do. Despite everything, Lena almost laughed. You married me because I'm a bad liar? I married you because you had no choice, which makes you predictable, and because you negotiated terms before agreeing, which makes you smart. And because when I looked at you, I didn't see the calculated ambition I've seen in every other woman who's wanted access to my life. I don't want access to your life. I want my life back. That's not an option. Then what is? Vittorio stood, draining the last of his espresso. Learning to build a new one. Your tutor arrives in an hour. Don't be late. He left her sitting alone at the table, sunlight painting patterns across expensive china. Lena picked up her coffee and discovered her hands were shaking. This was her life now. Training to fight enemies she couldn't see. Learning a language she'd never asked to speak. Playing a role she'd never auditioned for. All because her father had been weak and stupid and selfish. Signora Carrara appeared in the doorway, her expression sympathetic. Come, child, we should prepare you for Dimitri. He's not patient with those who arrive unprepared. The training room was in the villa's basement. Windowless, fluorescent lit, smelling of sweat and rubber. Mats covered the floor. Weapons lined one wall in locked cases. Dimitri was exactly what Lena expected. 6.5 feet of solid muscle, blonde hair cropped military short, pale blue eyes that assessed her like she was a problem to solve. You are the new wife, he said in heavily accented English. Senor Salazar says I make you dangerous. He didn't ask if I wanted to be dangerous. Want is irrelevant. You are liability now. I make you asset. For the next 3 hours, Dimitri put Lena through hell. He taught her how to fall without breaking bones, how to strike vulnerable points on an attacker's body, how to use an opponent's momentum against them. Lena hit the mat so many times she lost count. Her muscles screamed, her body ached, but she didn't quit. Because quitting meant giving Vittorio one more reason to see her as weak. Better, Dimitri said finally, when Lena managed to execute a throw that actually looked competent. You have anger. Anger is useful if controlled. I have plenty of anger. Good. Use it. Channel it. Make it weapon. By the time the session ended, Lena could barely walk. Signora Carrara appeared with water and a sympathetic smile. He's brutal, the older woman said, but effective. In 3 months, you will be grateful. In 3 months, I'll probably be dead from exhaustion. Drama doesn't suit you, child. Come. Lunch, then your Italian lesson. The Italian tutor was a middle-aged woman named Professoressa Russo, who spoke no English and expected Lena to keep up through sheer immersion. It was exhausting. By dinner, Lena's brain felt like it had been put through a blender. Vittorio appeared at 7, still dressed for business, tablet in hand. How was your first day? Brutal. Dimitri said you did well. Dimitri said I have useful anger. He's not wrong. Vittorio pulled out a chair for her. Sit. Eat. You need your strength. Dinner was quiet. Lena picked at grilled fish and roasted vegetables while Vittorio worked on his tablet, occasionally answering phone calls in rapid Italian. She watched him work, fascinated despite herself. He commanded with quiet authority, never raising his voice, never repeating himself. People jumped to obey. This was power, real power, not the kind that came from muscles or guns, but from absolute certainty that your word was law. Stop staring, Vittorio said without looking up. I'm trying to figure you out. Any success? Not yet. Good. Keep me interesting. After dinner, they returned to the bedroom they now shared. Lena changed in the bathroom, emerging in another silk nightgown she hadn't chosen. Vittorio was already on the couch with his blanket, reading. "Don't you ever sleep in a bed?" Lena asked. "When the year is up, I will." "That's ridiculous. You're too tall for that couch." "I've slept in worse places." Lena climbed into the massive bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. "Where?" "Afghanistan. Chechnya. Places where beds were a luxury." He turned a page. "The couch is fine." "Were you military?" "Once. Long ago." "What happened?" "I found more profitable uses for my skills." Crime, he meant. Violence for money instead of country. Lena should have been horrified. Instead, she found herself curious. "Do you ever regret it?" Vittorio looked at her then, really looked at her. "Regret is useless. I made choices. I live with them." "Even if those choices hurt people?" "Especially then." He returned to his reading, clearly done with the conversation. Lena lay in the darkness, listening to him breathe, and wondered if she could ever understand a man who spoke about violence the way other people discussed weather. The days began to blur together. Mornings with Dmitri, learning to turn her body into a weapon. Afternoons with Professoressa Russo, stumbling through Italian grammar. Evenings with Vittorio, sharing meals in silence in equal measure. Slowly, painfully, Lena began to adapt. She learned to fall without flinching, learned to count in Italian, learned which guards were friendly and which ones watched her like she might run. She learned Vittorio's routines, how he took his coffee, how he worked late into the night, how he never seemed to fully relax even in his own home, and she learned that despite everything, he kept his promises. He never touched her without permission, never pushed for more than she'd agreed to give. The couch remained his domain, the bed remained hers. It was maddening and confusing and nothing like what she'd expected. 3 weeks after the wedding, Lena woke to find Vittorio already gone. A note on his pillow, something he'd started doing when business took him away early. Meetings in Rome. Back by dinner. "Dmitri will work you hard today." Lena crumpled the note and got ready for training. Dmitri was indeed merciless that morning, pushing her through drills until sweat soaked through her clothes and her muscles trembled. "Better," he said finally. "Now we shoot." The shooting range was climate-controlled, soundproofed, lined with targets at varying distances. Dmitri placed a handgun in Lena's hand, heavy, cold, utterly foreign. "First rule, gun is always loaded. Second rule, finger off trigger until ready to fire. Third rule, never point at anything you don't intend to destroy." He taught her stance, grip, sight alignment. The first shot nearly knocked her backward. The second went wide. By the 20th, she was starting to get a feel for it. "Adequate," Dmitri pronounced. "Practice will make proficient." "Why do I need to know how to shoot?" "Because Senor Salazar has enemies. Because you are target. Because one day gun might save your life." It was the most words he'd strung together since they'd met. "Has anyone ever tried to hurt one of his wives before?" Lena asked. Dimitri's expression darkened. "There have been incidents. Not with previous wife, but with others Senor Salazar cares about. His world is dangerous." "Then why bring anyone into it?" "Because even dangerous men need family." After training, Lena showered and found Senora Carrara waiting with fresh clothes and a knowing smile. "You're improving quickly," the older woman said. "Dmitri rarely compliments anyone." "He called me adequate." From Dmitri, that's high praise. Lena dressed in casual elegance, clothes she was starting to recognize as her new normal. Nothing from her old life fit here. Not her ratty jeans or concert t-shirts or cheap sneakers. Everything was designer now. Expensive, chosen by someone else. "Senora Carrara," Lena said carefully, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, child." "Why do you work for him? For Vittorio? You seem too kind for this world." The older woman's smile turned sad. "Senor Salazar saved my son's life 20 years ago. My boy was in debt to very bad men. They would have killed him. Vittorio paid the debt, gave my son work, kept him safe." "And you've been here ever since?" "Loyalty for loyalty. It's how his world works." Before Lena could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. Courtyard. 10 minutes. Come alone. M.M. Marco, Vittorio's nephew. Lena found him waiting by a fountain, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. Is something wrong? She asked. That depends on your definition of wrong. Marco glanced around, making sure they were alone. My uncle doesn't know I'm here, and he wouldn't be happy if he found out. Then why are you here? Because I thought you should know what you're walking into, really walking into. Lena's stomach tightened. What do you mean? Marco pulled out his phone, showed her a photograph. A beautiful woman with dark hair and calculating eyes. Her name is Isabella Marchetti. You saw her at your wedding. She's convinced she should be standing where you are. Vittorio's not interested in her. No, but she's very interested in making your life difficult. Marco scrolled to another photo, Lena herself, captured leaving the villa. She has people watching you, waiting for you to make a mistake. What kind of mistake? Any kind. Running away, having an affair, embarrassing my uncle publicly. The moment you slip, she'll use it to convince him you're not worth the trouble. Lena's hands clenched. Let her try. That's the spirit I was hoping for. Marco smiled. Look, I know this situation is fucked up. I know you didn't choose this, but my uncle, he's not the monster you probably think he is. He forced me into marriage. He gave you a choice your father denied you. That's different. Not by much. Marco was quiet for a moment. When I was 16, my father died, murdered by competitors. My mother couldn't protect me, but Vittorio could. He took me in, trained me, made sure I survived in a world that would have eaten me alive. So you owe him. So I love him. There's a difference. Marco met her eyes. He's ruthless, yes, dangerous, absolutely. But he protects what's his, and whether you like it or not, you're his now. I don't want to be anyone's property. Then don't be property. Be a partner. Be dangerous yourself. Make him need you instead of just owning you. Before Lena could process that, Marco's phone buzzed. His face went pale. Shit, he's back early. If he finds me talking to you. Go, Lena said. I won't mention this. Marco disappeared just as Lena heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Vittorio approaching, still in his business suit, expression unreadable. You're back early, she said, keeping her voice steady. Meetings finished ahead of schedule. He studied her face. Is something wrong? No, just getting some air. You're a terrible liar, Lena. It was the first time he'd used her first name instead of Miss Whitmore. Something shifted between them, subtle but undeniable. Marco was here, Lena admitted. He wanted to warn me about Isabella. Vittorio's jaw tightened. What did he tell you? That she's watching me, waiting for me to fail. And I don't plan to give her the satisfaction. Something that might have been approval flickered in Vittorio's eyes. Good. Come. We have dinner plans. Plans? You're about to meet the rest of my world. Time to see if all that training has prepared you. An hour later, Lena found herself in the back of Vittorio's car, wearing a dress that cost more than her old apartment's monthly rent, driving into Rome as sunset painted the city gold. Where are we going? She asked. Dinner with business associates. Politicians, mostly. They want to meet my new wife. To judge me, you mean? Yes. At least he was honest. The restaurant was exclusive, the kind of place that didn't have prices on menus because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Private room, armed security, men in expensive suits and women dripping with diamonds. Lena recognized some faces from the wedding. Others were new. All of them assessed her the moment she walked in on Vittorio's arm. Gentlemen, ladies, Vittorio said smoothly, speaking English for Lena's benefit. My wife, Lena. She smiled, shook hands, accepted compliments that felt like weapons. She's lovely, Vittorio, one silver-haired politician said, though terribly young. Are you sure she's ready for the complexities of your world? Before Vittorio could answer, Lena spoke. I'm standing right here, Senator. You could ask me directly. Surprise flickered across the man's face. Of course. My apologies. Tell me, Mrs. Salazar, what do you know of Italian politics? Very little, Lena admitted. But I'm a fast learner, and I'm discovering that power has the same language everywhere. Money, leverage, and knowing when to stay quiet. The table went silent. Then the senator laughed. She has teeth, Vittorio. I like her. Dinner was a careful dance of conversation and observation. Lena listened more than she spoke, filing away details about who deferred to whom, who held grudges, who was sleeping with whose wife. This was Vittorio's world. Power measured in favors owed and secrets kept. And for the first time, Lena began to see the opportunity Marco had mentioned. Knowledge was currency here, and she was gathering it. Halfway through the meal, Isabella Marchetti appeared at their table, elegant in a black dress that left little to imagination. "Vittorio, darling," she purred, "I didn't know you'd be here tonight." "Isabella." His tone was carefully neutral. "You know my wife, Lena." Isabella's smile was poison wrapped in silk. "Of course." The blushing bride. "Tell me, dear, how are you adjusting to married life? It must be so different from wherever you came from." "Boston," Lena said pleasantly. "And yes, it's very different. But I'm finding Italian hospitality quite memorable." "How charming. Though I wonder, do you ever feel out of your depth? This world can be so complicated for outsiders." Lena met Isabella's eyes directly. "I've learned that the only people who feel threatened by outsiders are those afraid of being replaced." The table went deadly quiet. Isabella's smile turned brittle. "How presumptuous." "How honest," Lena corrected. "It's refreshing, don't you think?" Vittorio's hand found Lena's under the table, squeezing gently. Warning or approval, she couldn't tell. Isabella excused herself with frozen dignity. After she left, the senator laughed again. "Your wife has claws, Vittorio. I definitely like her." In the car ride home, Vittorio was silent. Lena braced for anger. Instead, he said quietly, "That was dangerous. She started it. Isabella has powerful friends. You just made an enemy." "I already had an enemy. Now she knows I'm not afraid of her." Vittorio looked at her, really looked at her, and Lena saw something new in his expression, respect. "Marco was right to warn you," he said, "but he was wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "You don't need to make me need you. You're already becoming indispensable." That night, for the first time since the wedding, they talked, really talked, about Lena's life before, her mother's death, her lonely childhood, her dreams of studying literature. About Vittorio's past, carefully edited but more honest than she'd expected. The military, the choices that led him into darkness, the empire he'd built from blood and cunning. "Do you regret it?" Lena asked. "Any of it?" "I regret the men I've killed who didn't deserve it. I regret the trust I gave to those who betrayed it. But the life I've built?" He shook his head. "No, this is who I am. A criminal. A king. In my own kingdom. And what does that make me?" Vittorio smiled faintly, still being decided. Lena lay awake long after he'd settled on his couch, thinking about power and survival and the strange man who'd bought her freedom by stealing it. And for the first time since arriving in Italy, she didn't cry herself to sleep. Instead, she planned. If she was going to survive Vittorio Salazar's world, she needed to stop being a victim and start being a player. Marco had given her the key. Be dangerous yourself. Time to learn how. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened. Over the following weeks, Lena stopped waiting for rescue and started building armor. Each morning, with Dimitri taught her body to become a weapon. Each afternoon, with Professoressa Russo gave her the language to navigate Vittorio's world. Each evening, watching her husband command empires from dinner tables taught her the real currency of power. Information. Observation. Knowing when to speak and when to let silence do the work. She was learning, and Vittorio noticed. "You're different," he said one night, a month after the Isabella incident. They'd fallen into a routine of sorts, dinner together, conversation that grew less guarded each evening, then retreat to their separate sides of the bedroom. "Different how?" Lena asked, setting down her wine glass. "Sharper. You watch people now. Calculate. It's interesting." "You sound surprised." "I expected defiance or surrender, not adaptation." Lena met his eyes across the table. "Maybe I'm tired of being a victim." "Good. Victims don't survive long in my world." Then it's a good thing I'm learning to be something else. Something flickered in Vittorio's expression. Approval mixed with caution, like watching a blade being sharpened and wondering if it would eventually cut you. The next morning, Dmitri introduced close quarters combat. Real fighting, not just defensive moves. Today we practice for worst scenario, he announced, circling Lena on the mats. Enemy has you cornered. No escape. No help coming. What you do? Fight. How you fight? Lena demonstrated the techniques he'd taught her. Strikes to vulnerable points, using momentum, creating opportunities. Dmitri shook his head. Adequate technique, but you hold back. Why? I don't want to hurt you. In real situation, enemy wants to hurt you, wants to kill you. Hesitation means death. He moved closer. Again, this time, no holding back. They sparred and Lena felt something shift inside her. The anger she'd been carrying since Rome, since her father's betrayal, since being forced into this life, finally found an outlet. She stopped pulling punches. Dmitri grinned when she managed to land a solid hit. There. That is what I want. The fire. You wanted me to hit you? I want you to survive. Survival requires fire. After training, Lena found Marco waiting outside the gym, looking nervous. We need to talk, he said quietly. Somewhere private. They walked to a secluded corner of the gardens, far from the villa's security cameras. What's wrong? Lena asked. There's going to be trouble at the gala this weekend. Marco glanced around, making sure they were alone. My uncle is hosting a fundraiser for several politicians. Isabella will be there, and she's been making noise about you. What kind of noise? Questioning your background, your motives, suggesting you're using Vittorio for his money. Marco's expression darkened. She's trying to turn people against you before you have a chance to establish yourself. Lena's jaw tightened. Let her talk. It's not just talk. She has influence. If enough people start questioning your place beside my uncle, it undermines his authority, makes him look weak for choosing you. Then I'll prove them wrong. How? Lena thought about the past month of training, lessons, observation. By showing them I belong, that I'm not some naive girl who stumbled into power, that I chose this. Marco studied her carefully. Did you choose this? No, but I'm choosing what happens next. The gala was 3 days away, which gave Lena 3 days to prepare. She approached it like Dmitri approached combat training, with strategy, focus, and absolute commitment to winning. Signora Carrara helped her select a dress that walked the line between elegant and formidable. Deep emerald silk that brought out her eyes, fitted perfectly to her frame. Expensive enough to signal wealth, but tasteful enough to avoid looking desperate. Professoressa Russo drilled her on conversational Italian, focusing on the formal phrases she'd need for political small talk, and Vittorio, whether intentionally or not, gave her the most valuable preparation of all, information. The senator you met at dinner is being investigated for corruption, he mentioned casually one evening. He'll be desperate for allies. The Minister of Finance is having an affair with his chief of staff. The industrialist in the corner has been embezzling from his own company. Lena absorbed it all, filing details away like ammunition for future battles. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because knowledge is power, and I'd rather you have power than be vulnerable. Vittorio refilled her wine glass. Isabella will try to isolate you at the gala, make you look foolish or out of place. You need to be ready. I will be. I know. He paused, something unreadable crossing his face. You've surprised me, Lena. I expected resistance. Instead, you're becoming formidable. Is that a problem? Not yet. But formidable wives can be complicated. Complicated how? Vittorio smiled faintly. They make you care whether they stay or leave. That's dangerous. Before Lena could unpack that statement, his phone rang. Business. Always business. She listened to him switch into rapid Italian, giving orders with quiet authority, and realized something startling. She was starting to understand him, not just his language, but his rhythm, the way he thought, the calculations behind every decision, and more disturbing, she was starting to respect it. The night of the gala arrived with unseasonable rain that turned the drive to the venue into a blur of headlights and wet pavement. The event was being held at a restored palazzo in Rome's historic district, all marble columns and frescoed ceilings, and the weight of centuries watching from every corner. Lena stepped out of the car on Vittorio's arm, cameras flashing despite the weather. She'd learned to smile for them now, not the terrified grimace from the wedding, but something controlled, calculated. A woman who belonged. Inside, the palazzo glittered with wealth and power. Politicians in expensive suits, socialites dripping with jewelry, businessmen whose fortunes could buy small countries. And threading through them all, watching Lena with predatory interest, was Isabella Marchetti. "She's already working the room," Vittorio murmured. "Stay close." But Lena had learned enough to know that staying close would make her look dependent, weak. "Actually," she said, "I think I'll mingle." Vittorio's eyebrows rose. "Alone?" "I can't hide behind you forever. Time to see if all those lessons stuck." For a moment, she thought he might argue. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Don't let Isabella bait you into anything public." "I won't." "And Lena?" He caught her hand briefly. "Make them remember you." She moved through the crowd with deliberate confidence, accepting champagne from a passing waiter, exchanging pleasantries in carefully practiced Italian. People watched her, some with curiosity, others with judgment, a few with calculation. "Mrs. Salazar," a woman's voice said behind her, "how lovely to see you again." Lena turned to find Isabella flanked by two other women, all three regarding her with the kind of polite hostility that drew blood without raising voices. "Isabella," Lena said pleasantly, "what a beautiful dress. Vintage Valentino, though I suppose at your age you wouldn't appreciate the history." The jab was deliberate. Lena smiled. "On the contrary, I find history fascinating, especially the history of women who mistake youth for weakness." One of Isabella's companions, a blonde whose jewelry could fund a small hospital, laughed. "She has spirit. I like that." Isabella's expression tightened. "Spirit is charming until it becomes inappropriate. Tell me, dear, how are you finding married life? It must be so different from what you're accustomed to." "It is," Lena agreed. "I'm learning to navigate a world where people say one thing and mean another, where alliances shift like sand, where everyone wants something they're not willing to ask for directly." "How astute. And what have you learned about your husband? Surely you've discovered by now that Vittorio is a man of particular appetites." The implication was clear. Isabella wanted Lena to react, to show jealousy or insecurity. Instead, Lena took a sip of champagne and smiled. "I've learned that my husband values loyalty above all else, and that he has excellent judgment about who deserves his trust." "Does he?" Isabella's voice dropped to something colder. "I've known Vittorio for 15 years. I've seen wives come and go. What makes you think you'll be any different?" "Because I don't want him for his money or his power," Lena said quietly. "I want to survive. And survival makes me useful in ways you'll never be." Before Isabella could respond, a man's voice interrupted. "Ladies, what fascinating conversation has you all looking so intense?" Lena turned to find the senator from the dinner party, his expression amused. "Just getting to know each other better," Isabella said with forced brightness. Mrs. Salazar was sharing her thoughts on marriage. Was she? How delightful. The senator offered Lena his arm. "My dear, would you honor me with a dance? I'd love to hear more about your perspective." Lena accepted, letting him lead her to the dance floor and away from Isabella's circle. "Thank you," she said as they began to waltz. "For rescuing you? Consider it a favor that will be remembered." The senator smiled. "Isabella has been insufferable all evening. You handled her beautifully." "She's not a fan of mine. She's not a fan of anyone who threatens her position. For years she thought she'd eventually wear Vittorio down, convince him to marry her. Then you appeared." "I didn't appear. I was purchased." The senator laughed. "My dear girl, everyone in this room has been purchased in one way or another. The difference is whether you make the transaction worthwhile." "And am I? Worthwhile?" "You're interesting. That's more valuable than beauty or obedience. Vittorio needs someone who challenges him. His last wife bored him to death, literally drove herself into an early grave trying to maintain appearances she couldn't sustain." Lena filed that information away. Another piece of the puzzle that was her husband. When the dance ended, the senator escorted her back toward Vittorio, who was deep in conversation with three men in expensive suits. "Your wife is delightful," the senator announced, "and sharp. You chose well, my friend." Vittorio's eyes found Lena's. "I know." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, each one a careful negotiation of power and image. Lena held her own, deflecting barbs with practiced grace, collecting information like currency. By the time they left the palazzo after midnight, rain still falling in sheets, Lena was exhausted but exhilarated. "You did well tonight," Vittorio said in the car. "Isabella cornered me almost immediately." "I know, I was watching. And you didn't intervene?" "You didn't need me to." He turned to look at her, city lights painting his face in shifting shadows. "You held your ground, made allies, showed them you're not fragile." "Is that what you wanted? For me to be tested?" "I wanted to see what you'd become. And tonight, I got my answer." "Which is?" "Dangerous. In the best possible way." Back at the villa, they fell into their nighttime routine, changing in separate spaces, occupying their designated territories in the bedroom. But something had shifted between them, some unspoken acknowledgement that they were becoming partners instead of captor and captive. Lena lay in the darkness, listening to Vittorio's breathing from the couch, and asked the question that had been building for weeks. "Do you ever regret marrying me?" Silence stretched for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I regret the circumstances, but not the outcome." "What's the outcome?" "Still being written." The next morning brought news that changed everything. Lena was in her Italian lesson when Marco burst into the room, face pale. "We have a situation," he said. "Vittorio needs you. Now." Professoressa Russo left without being asked. Marco led Lena to Vittorio's private office, a room she'd never been allowed to enter. Inside, Vittorio stood at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, expression carved from ice. When he saw Lena, he ended the call. "Sit," he said. Lena sat. Vittorio poured himself whiskey even though it was barely noon. "There's been a complication. Your father has been arrested." The world tilted. "What? Where?" "Boston. Tax evasion, fraud, money laundering. The FBI has been building a case for months. I don't understand. His debt was forgiven. He was supposed to be safe." "Safe from me? Yes. Not from American law enforcement." Vittorio drained his glass. "They're offering him a deal. Reduced sentence if he cooperates. Provides information about international criminal organizations." Understanding crashed over Lena like a wave. "About you." "About me? Will he do it?" Vittorio's laugh was bitter. "Your father is a coward and a fool. What do you think?" Lena's hands clenched. "What happens if he talks?" "My operations in America become complicated. Several associates face prosecution, and you," he paused, "you become a liability." "A liability? How?" "Your leverage against me. If our enemies know I care about your safety, they'll use you." "Do you? Care about my safety?" Vittorio met her eyes. "More than I should." The admission hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to address. "What are my options?" Lena asked. "I can send you somewhere safe, remote, protected. You'd be comfortable but isolated. Or, you stay, accept the increased danger. Let me teach you how to truly survive in this world." "That's not really a choice. It's the only choice anyone in my position can offer." Lena thought about the girl who'd arrived in Italy 3 months ago, terrified, helpless, trapped. Then thought about who she'd become, trained, educated, capable of holding her own in rooms full of predators. "I stay," she said. "Lena, I'm not running. Not from my father's mistakes, not from the consequences of this life." "You wanted a wife who wouldn't betray you? Then trust me enough to let me prove it." Something shifted in Vittorio's expression. "The danger will increase. Security will tighten. Your freedom will be even more limited." "I understand." "Do you? Because once you make this choice, there's no going back. You'll be marked, known, a target." "I've been a target since the moment I married you. At least now I'm armed." Vittorio studied her for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and made a call in rapid Italian. When he finished, he looked at Lena with something close to admiration. Dmitri will begin advanced training tomorrow. Real scenarios, live ammunition. You'll learn to kill, not just defend. Okay. And you'll accompany me to more meetings. Learn the business. Understand how everything works. Why? Because if something happens to me, you need to know how to protect yourself, how to negotiate, how to survive without me. The thought of Vittorio dying sent an unexpected jolt through Lena's chest. When had that happened? When had she started caring whether this ruthless man lived or died? Nothing's going to happen to you, she said. You don't know that. Then don't let it. Vittorio smiled faintly. Demanding little thing, aren't you? You're the one who said I was becoming formidable. I'm starting to think I underestimated you. That afternoon, Lena called her father. The prison connection was crackling, distant. Michael Whitmore's voice sounded small and defeated. Lena? Baby, thank God, I've been trying to reach you, but don't. She cut him off. Don't call me baby. Don't pretend we're family. Lena, please, I need your help. The lawyers say if I cooperate, if I give them information, I might only serve 5 years instead of information about Vittorio. Silence. That's what they want, isn't it? Lena's voice was cold. They want you to betray the man who saved your worthless life. He didn't save me, he bought you. Because you sold me. And now you want to compound that betrayal by putting him in prison? Lena, he's a criminal. He's dangerous. You need to get away from... He's my husband, and he's kept every promise he made, which is more than I can say for you. Please, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. For a moment, just a moment, Lena felt the old sympathy stir. This was her father, the man who'd raised her. Then she remembered his hollow eyes in that Roman study, his willingness to trade her freedom for his safety. Here's what you do, she said quietly. You tell the FBI nothing, you serve your time, and you never contact me again. Lena, I'm not your daughter anymore. I'm Vittorio Salazar's wife, and that means I protect his interests, even from you. She hung up before he could respond. When she emerged from the office where she'd made the call, Vittorio was waiting in the hallway. You heard? She asked. Every word. Are you disappointed? In what? Your loyalty? He moved closer. Lena, you just chose me over your own father. He stopped being my father the moment he put me on that plane. Still, it was a choice, one you didn't have to make. Yes, I did. Because if I can't trust you, I have nothing, no safety, no future, no life worth living. At least with you, I know where I stand. Vittorio reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. It was the first time he'd touched her face since the wedding kiss. Where do you think you stand? He asked quietly. I'm still figuring that out. His hand lingered a moment longer, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Then he stepped back, putting careful distance between them again. Dmitri wants to start training at dawn. I suggest you rest. Vittorio? He paused at the doorway. Thank you, Lena said, for giving me the choice about staying. You've earned choices. Don't make me regret giving them to you. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about her father in prison, about the life she'd left behind, about the woman she was becoming. Around 2 a.m, she got up and walked onto the balcony. The gardens were silver with moonlight, peaceful and deceptive. Can't sleep? She turned to find Vittorio standing in the doorway, wearing sleep pants and nothing else. In the moonlight, she could see the scars that marked his body, bullet wounds, knife cuts, the history of violence written on his skin. Too much thinking, she admitted. About? Everything. My father. This life. You. He moved to stand beside her at the railing, close enough that she could feel his warmth. What conclusions have you reached? That I'm angrier at myself than at you. Why? Because I'm starting to understand why you did this, why you married me. Lena turned to face him. You wanted someone who owed you everything, someone who'd never betray you because they had nowhere else to go. And it's working. I have nowhere else to go. No family who wants me. No country I can return to safely. No life except the one you've given me. Does that make you hate me? Lena considered the question honestly. No. It makes me hate that it doesn't make me hate you. Vittorio's laugh was quiet, almost sad. You're too honest for your own good. Someone in this marriage should be. They stood in comfortable silence, watching moonlight paint the world in shades of silver and shadow. Finally, Vittorio spoke. There's something you should know about the year deadline. Lena's heart skipped. What about it? I'm removing it. She blinked. What? The agreement. 1 year before I expect the marriage to be complete, I'm rescinding it. I don't understand. It means you decide when, if ever. I won't force you. He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the darkness. I wanted a wife I could trust. Forcing you into my bed won't build trust, so I'm giving you a choice. Why? Because you've earned it. Because you chose to stay when you could have run. Because... He paused, seeming to struggle with words. Because somewhere in the past 3 months, you stopped being a transaction and started being a person I actually respect. Lena felt something crack open in her chest. Not love, she wasn't ready to call it that, but something softer than hate. Something almost like affection. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. You're still trapped in this life. Still married to a man old enough to be your grandfather. Still... Stop. Lena put her hand over his. Just for tonight, can we stop tallying everything that's wrong and just be? Vittorio looked at their joined hands like they were a puzzle he couldn't solve. Then slowly, carefully, he turned his hand over and laced his fingers through hers. They stood that way for a long time, two people bound by contract and circumstance, holding on to each other in the darkness. And for the first time since arriving in Italy, Lena felt something almost like peace. The next morning brought changes that rippled through the villa like aftershocks. Additional security appeared overnight, men with cold eyes and weapons they didn't bother hiding. The gates received new cameras. Guards doubled their patrols. The world had shifted, and everyone felt it. Dmitri met Lena in the training room at dawn, his expression grimmer than usual. Today we stop playing, he announced. Real scenarios, real danger. You understand? I understand. Good, because hesitation will get you killed. He'd transformed the space into something that looked like a nightmare. Dim lighting, obstacles creating blind corners, the sharp smell of cordite in the air. Situation, Dmitri said. You are alone in house. Intruders breach security. You have pistol, 30 seconds to make decision. Fight or hide. Lena's heart hammered. That depends on... No depends. 30 seconds. Decide. Fight. If I hide, they'll find me eventually. Better to control the engagement. Good. Show me. For the next 2 hours, Dmitri ran her through scenarios that felt terrifyingly real. Attackers coming from blind spots, multiple threats, weapon malfunctions, everything that could go wrong. Lena failed most of them. Again, Dmitri said each time, relentless. Failure in training means survival in reality. By the time the session ended, Lena was shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. You improved, Dmitri said, which was the closest he'd come to praise in weeks. But you still think too much. Trust instinct. Training will make instinct correct. How long until my instinct doesn't get me killed? 6 months. Maybe less if you stop hesitating. Lena showered and found Signora Carrara waiting with breakfast and a carefully neutral expression. Signor Salazar wants to see you in his office, the older woman said, after you've eaten. Is something wrong? That's not for me to say, child, but dress well. You're going into the city. Lena found Vittorio behind his desk, studying multiple screens showing what looked like security footage and financial reports. He'd shed his jacket, sleeves rolled up, reading glasses perched on his nose. The glasses were new, or rather, she'd never seen him wear them before. You need glasses? She asked. He glanced up, almost smiled. Only for reading. Vanity usually keeps them hidden. Why show me now? Because you've earned honesty. He removed them, set them aside. How was training? Brutal. Dmitri says I think too much. He's not wrong. You analyze when you should act. Vittorio stood, came around the desk. But that's also what makes you valuable. You see angles others miss. Is that why you wanted to see me? To discuss my analytical skills? No, I wanted to see you because we're going to Rome. You're attending a business meeting. Lena blinked. What kind of business meeting? The kind where I acquire a shipping company. The owner is nervous about selling to me. Your presence might soften the negotiation. You want me there as decoration. I want you there as my wife. There's a difference. Vittorio's expression grew serious. This is part of your education. You need to understand how legitimate business intersects with less legitimate operations, how money gets cleaned, how power gets consolidated. You're teaching me to be a criminal. I'm teaching you to survive in a world where morality is a luxury most people can't afford. He handed her a folder. Read this in the car. Everything you need to know about the shipping company, its owner, and why this acquisition matters. The drive to Rome took 90 minutes. Lena spent most of it studying the folder while Vittorio made phone calls in Italian, his voice never rising but somehow still radiating absolute authority. The shipping company owner was named Giovanni Russo, 62, twice divorced, desperate to retire but afraid of what would happen to his business without his protection. His company moved legitimate cargo across the Mediterranean, but also served as a convenient way to transport less legal goods. He's scared, Lena said, looking up from the file. He should be. His competitors would destroy him the moment I stopped protecting his routes. So you're offering protection in exchange for ownership. Simplified but accurate. That's extortion. That's business. He gets to retire wealthy and alive. I get a legitimate company to diversify my portfolio. Everyone wins. Except he doesn't have a real choice. Vittorio looked at her then, something sharp in his expression. Like you didn't have a real choice? Exactly like that. And yet here you are, reading briefing documents and preparing to help me close the deal. Maybe choice is overrated. Maybe accepting reality and making the best of it is the smarter play. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to say there was a difference between accepting reality and surrendering to it. But was there? Really? She'd accepted this marriage, this life, this man, and in accepting it, she'd found something she never expected: purpose, power. A strange kind of freedom that came from knowing exactly where she stood. The meeting was held in a private dining room at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the Tiber. Giovanni Russo arrived with his lawyer, a nervous, balding man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Russo himself was exactly what Lena expected. Expensive suit worn with the carelessness of old money, tired eyes that had seen too much, hands that shook slightly when he reached for his wine. "Signor Salazar," he said, his English heavily accented. "Thank you for meeting me. And this must be your beautiful wife." "Lena," Vittorio said smoothly. "My partner in all things." The phrasing was deliberate, not decoration, not accessory. Partner. Lena shook Russo's hand, felt the tremor in his grip, and understood immediately why Vittorio had brought her. This man was terrified of Vittorio, but maybe he wouldn't be as terrified of her. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Signor Russo," she said in careful Italian. "My husband speaks very highly of your company." Surprise flickered across Russo's face. "You speak Italian?" "I'm learning. Please forgive any mistakes." "Your accent is charming." He relaxed slightly, the way people do when they feel less threatened. Lunch was served, courses that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, while Vittorio and Russo's lawyer discussed terms. Lena listened, translating what she could, watching the subtle dance of negotiation. Russo kept glancing at her, seeming to draw comfort from her presence. Finally, he addressed her directly. "Tell me, Signora Salazar, how do you feel about your husband's business ventures?" It was a test. Everyone at the table knew it. Lena set down her wineglass and met his eyes. "I think my husband is a man who honors his commitments, who protects what belongs to him, who understands that loyalty is worth more than money. And the less traditional aspects of his work? I think the world is more complicated than people pretend, and I think my husband navigates that complexity with more integrity than most men who claim to be legitimate." Russo studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Vittorio. "Your wife is either very brave or very naive." "She's neither," Vittorio said quietly. "She's smart enough to see the world as it is, not as she wishes it were." "Then she's smarter than my ex-wives." Russo laughed, but it was bitter. They wanted my money but pretended to hate how I earned it. The hypocrisy destroyed both marriages. I prefer honesty, Lena said, even when it's uncomfortable. Something shifted in Russo's expression. He looked at his lawyer, then back at Vittorio. Your offer. The terms are acceptable. I'll sign. Just like that, a 40 million euro company changed hands over tiramisu and espresso. On the drive back to the villa, Vittorio was quiet. Lena watched the Italian countryside blur past the window, processing what had just happened. You used me, she said finally. Yes. To make him feel safe enough to sign. Yes. Will you do that again? Use me in negotiations? Vittorio glanced at her. If you let me, you were effective. He trusted you in a way he'd never trust me. Because I'm not you. I'm the acceptable face of your empire. You're my wife. That makes you part of the empire, not just its face. He paused. Does it bother you, being used that way? Lena considered the question honestly. It should, but it doesn't. Is that wrong? It's practical. Welcome to my world. That evening, Marco appeared at dinner with news that wiped the satisfaction of the day's success away. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Isabella is making moves. Vittorio set down his fork. What kind of moves? She's been meeting with Dmitry Volkov, your competitor in the Eastern Territories. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. When? Vittorio's voice was deadly calm. 3 times in the past week. My sources say she's offering information, details about your operations, your security, your... Marco's eyes flicked to Lena. Your vulnerabilities. Meaning me, Lena said. Meaning both of you. She's positioning herself as an alternative, suggesting that Vittorio's marriage has made him soft, distracted. Vittorio stood, walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. Lena recognized the posture. Absolute control masking absolute fury. Volkov is testing my boundaries, he said quietly, seeing if I'm vulnerable enough to push. Are you? Marco asked. No, but he doesn't know that yet. Vittorio turned. Marco, I need surveillance on Isabella. Every meeting, every phone call, every person she contacts. Already arranged. And increase security here. Double the guards. No one enters the estate without my personal approval. Done. After Marco left, Lena found Vittorio still at the window, staring into darkness. This is because of me, she said. Because you married me. This is because Isabella is a vindictive woman who can't accept losing. He didn't turn around. But yes, you're the excuse she's using. Then let me fix it. Now he turned. How? Let me talk to her, woman to woman, no threats, no games, just honesty. That's a terrible idea. Why? Because you think I can't handle her? Because Isabella doesn't respond to honesty. She responds to power. Then I'll show her power. Lena moved to stand beside him. You said I was becoming formidable. Let me prove it. Vittorio studied her face in the dim light. If this goes wrong, it won't. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I won't embarrass you. I can promise I'll be smart. And I can promise that doing nothing makes us look weak. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded. Set up a meeting, public place, daytime, and you take 2 guards with you. Vittorio, non-negotiable. You want to do this, you do it my way. The meeting was arranged for 2 days later at a cafe near the Trevi Fountain. Public, crowded, unlikely to become violent. Isabella arrived 20 minutes late, a power move that fooled no one. She wore white, deliberate symbolism, Lena thought. Purity, innocence. Everything Lena supposedly wasn't. How quaint, Isabella said, settling into her chair with practiced grace. The child bride wants to have coffee. I wanted to talk, Lena said evenly, without our husband's shadows. I'm not married, dear. Some of us have standards. Lena smiled. And yet you've spent 15 years trying to marry mine. Curious. Isabella's expression hardened. I've known Vittorio since you were in diapers. I understand him in ways you never will. You understand the man he was, not the man he's become. He hasn't changed. He's still a criminal, still dangerous, still mine, Lena interrupted. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Not his business or his empire or his choices, just the fact that he chose me instead of you. He didn't choose you, he bought you. Yes, and every day since I've chosen to stay. Can you say the same? That if given the choice, he'd choose you? Isabella's hand tightened on her coffee cup. You think you're clever, but you're just a girl playing in a world you don't understand. I understand enough to know that meeting with Dmitry Volkov is treason, that sharing information about my husband's operations is suicide, that you're so consumed with jealousy that you're willing to destroy everything rather than accept defeat. The blood drained from Isabella's face. You can't prove. We have photos, recordings, documentation of every meeting, every phone call, every piece of information you've sold. Lena leaned forward. My husband could have you killed for this. He has before, for less. But he's letting me handle it because he respects me enough to give me the choice. What choice? You disappear. Leave Italy. Never contact Vittorio or anyone in his organization again. In exchange, we forget this happened. And if I refuse? Then Dmitry Volkov will receive proof that you've been feeding him false information. That you've been working for us all along, that every secret you sold him was designed to lead him into a trap. Lena smiled. How long do you think you'd survive that conversation? Isabella stared at her, trapped between impossible options. You're bluffing, she said finally. You don't have that kind of power. I'm Vittorio Salazar's wife. I have exactly as much power as he gives me. And right now, he's given me the power to decide whether you live or die. Lena stood. You have 48 hours to leave Italy. After that, I can't protect you from the consequences of your choices. She walked away without looking back, her heart hammering but her steps steady. The guards fell into step beside her, silent and professional. She'd done it. Faced down the woman who'd tried to destroy her and won. Vittorio was waiting at the villa when she returned. He'd clearly been pacing, unusual for a man who rarely showed nerves. How did it go? He asked. Lena told him everything, every word, every threat, every calculated risk. When she finished, Vittorio was quiet for a long moment. Then he started laughing. What's funny? Lena asked. You. Threatening Isabella with false information to Volkov. That's actually brilliant. It was the only leverage I had. No, you had me. You could have threatened her with my power. Instead, you threatened her with her own paranoia. Made her see enemies where there were only consequences. He pulled her into his arms, the first real embrace since their wedding. You're magnificent, terrifying, and magnificent. Lena let herself relax into his warmth. Is that a compliment? It's an acknowledgement. You're not my prisoner anymore, Lena. You're my partner. What's the difference? Partners choose to stay. 2 days later, Isabella Marchetti left Italy on a one-way flight to Argentina. The threat was gone. The danger had passed, but something new had begun. Lena noticed it in small ways. How Vittorio asked her opinion on business decisions. How he included her in meetings that had nothing to do with softening negotiations. How he'd stopped sleeping on the couch and now occupied his half of the bed with her tacit permission. They didn't touch, didn't cross the invisible line that separated their spaces. But the line was blurring. One evening, 6 months after the wedding, Lena found herself studying Vittorio as he worked. Silver hair catching lamplight, reading glasses perched on his nose, absolute focus radiating from every line of his body. What? He asked without looking up. Nothing, just thinking. About? How strange this has become. This life. This marriage. You. Now he looked at her. Strange how? I don't hate you anymore. That's progress, I suppose. I'm not sure it is. Hate is simple. This is complicated. Vittorio set aside his work, gave her his full attention. What is this, Lena? I don't know. Respect? Partnership? Something that's not love but isn't hate either. And that scares you. Yes. Because if I don't hate you, I have to take responsibility for my choices, for staying, for becoming part of your world. You could still leave. I wouldn't stop you. Lena met his eyes. Yes, you would. Not with chains or guards, but with the knowledge that I'd have nowhere safe to go, that your enemies would find me, That I'm safer here than anywhere else in the world. Is that why you stay? Safety? No, I stay because. She paused, searching for truth she wasn't sure she wanted to speak aloud. Because I'm more myself here than I ever was in Boston. Because you see me as someone capable instead of someone to be protected. Because this life, as strange and dangerous as it is, feels more real than anything I had before. Vittorio stood, moved to sit beside her on the couch, close enough to touch, but not touching. When my first wife died, he said quietly, I swore I'd never be vulnerable again, never let anyone close enough to hurt me. Then I met you, and bought me to prevent vulnerability, and discovered that buying you made me more vulnerable than loving you ever could. Because you're right. Hate is simple. This, whatever this is infinitely more dangerous. They sat in silence, the weight of unspoken feelings heavy between them. Finally, Lena asked, What happens now? That depends on what you want. I want honesty. I want partnership. She took a breath. I want to understand if what I'm feeling is real or just Stockholm Syndrome. What are you feeling? Lena turned to face him fully, like I might actually want this marriage to be real, not a contract or a transaction or a trap, but something we both choose. Vittorio reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his hand, scarred knuckles gentle against her skin. I've wanted that since the moment you negotiated terms before saying yes, he admitted. I just didn't think you'd ever feel the same. I'm not sure I do. Not completely. But I want to find out. That's enough. That's more than enough. He kissed her then. Not like the chaste touch at their wedding, but something deeper. A question and an answer. A beginning. Lena kissed him back, tasting possibility and danger in something that might eventually become love. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Vittorio rested his forehead against hers. We can go slow, he said, as slow as you need. I don't want slow. I want honest. I want real. Then we'll figure out what that means, together. That night, for the first time since the wedding, they fell asleep in the same bed, Lena curled against Vittorio's chest, his arms around her like he'd never let go. And somewhere between sleeping and waking, Lena realized the truth she'd been avoiding for months. She wasn't a prisoner anymore. She was exactly where she chose to be. The weeks that followed unfolded like a second beginning. Lena woke each morning wrapped in Vittorio's warmth, their bodies finding each other in sleep the way their lives had found each other in waking. The marriage that had started as a transaction slowly transformed into something neither of them had expected. Partnership built on honesty instead of illusion, respect instead of ownership. But the world outside their bedroom didn't care about their evolving relationship. And danger, as Vittorio had warned, never rested. It came on a Tuesday morning, 8 months after the wedding. Lena was in her Italian lesson when the explosion shook the villa's foundation. Windows rattled, Professoressa Russo screamed, and somewhere in the distance, alarms began to wail. Dmitri burst through the door, weapon drawn. With me, now! Lena didn't argue. She followed him through corridors suddenly filled with armed guards, her heart hammering against her ribs. All those months of training crystallized into pure instinct. Stay low, stay moving, trust the professionals. They reached Vittorio's office to find it transformed into a command center. Multiple screens showed security footage from around the estate. Guards spoke in rapid Italian, and at the center of it all stood Vittorio, utterly calm, giving orders with the precision of a general directing troops. He saw Lena and something flickered in his expression. Relief, then iron control snapping back into place. Report, he said to Dmitri. Car bomb at the south gate. 2 casualties, both attackers. Attempted breach from the east perimeter, neutralized. This is coordinated. Volkov. It wasn't a question. Dmitri nodded. Has to be. Same tactics he used in Prague. Vittorio's jaw tightened. How many attackers? Unknown. We're securing the grounds now. Good. Lena stays here. Armed guard at all times. He finally looked at her directly. You remember your training? Lena nodded, throat too tight for words. Good. Dmitri, give her a weapon. The Russian pulled a compact pistol from somewhere and handed it to Lena. The weight was familiar now. comforting in its deadly purpose. Safety off, Dmitri instructed. Anyone comes through that door who isn't me or Senor Salazar, you shoot center mass. No warning, no hesitation. I understand. Vittorio crossed to her, cupped her face in both hands. I need to handle this. Can you stay calm? Yes. I mean it, Lena. No heroics, no stupid risks. You stay in this room until I come back for you. What about you? What if I've survived worse than Dmitri Volkov? I'll survive this. He kissed her hard, brief, a promise sealed with desperation. Trust me. Then he was gone, taking half the guards with him, leaving Lena in a room that suddenly felt like both fortress and cage. Signora Carrara appeared moments later, surprisingly composed for someone whose home was under attack. Come away from the windows, child, she said calmly. Sit where you can see both doors. Lena obeyed, pistol held correctly, finger alongside the trigger guard just as Dmitri had taught her. They waited. Minutes stretched like hours. The alarms continued their mechanical screaming. Occasionally, gunfire cracked in the distance, sharp reports that made Lena's hands shake despite her training. Who is Dmitri Volkov? She asked, needing to fill the silence. A competitor, Signora Carrara said carefully. Russian, ambitious. He's been trying to expand into Vittorio's territories for years. Why attack now? Because Isabella gave him information. Because he thinks Vittorio is distracted. Because men like Volkov see kindness as weakness. Vittorio isn't kind. The older woman smiled sadly. With you, he is. More than he's been with anyone in years, and that makes you both vulnerable. More gunfire, closer this time. Lena's grip tightened on the pistol. Then silence. Terrible, absolute silence. Lena counted seconds. 30, 60, 90. The door handle turned. She raised the weapon, sighting down the barrel just as Dmitri had taught her. Marco stepped through, hands raised, face pale. Don't shoot! It's me! Lena lowered the gun with shaking hands. What's happening? They breached the main house. 5 attackers made it inside. Vittorio and the guards are hunting them now. Marco moved to the security monitors, studying the feeds. You need to stay here. It's the most defensible position. Where's Vittorio? Handling it. That's not an answer. Marco met her eyes. He's doing what he does best, protecting what's his. Another explosion rocked the building, this one much closer. The lights flickered, went dark, then emergency generators kicked in, bathing everything in red. And then Lena heard it. Footsteps in the corridor outside, running, desperate. The door burst open. A woman stumbled through, blood soaking her shirt, terror written across her face. One of the villa's staff, Lena recognized her from the kitchens. Help, she gasped. Please, they're coming. Behind her, a man appeared, tall, armed, eyes cold as winter. He raised his weapon. Lena didn't think, didn't hesitate. She fired. The recoil kicked through her wrists exactly as Dmitri had warned. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. And the attacker went down, red blooming across his chest. Lena stared at what she'd done. The pistol suddenly impossible to hold on to. She'd killed someone. Actually killed him. Marco was moving, checking the body, securing the fallen man's weapon. Good shot. Center mass, just like Dmitri taught you. Signora Carrara pulled the injured woman to safety, began applying pressure to her wound with practiced efficiency. And Lena stood frozen, unable to process the reality of taking a life. Lena, Marco's voice cut through her shock. Look at me. You did what you had to do. He would have killed her, probably killed all of us. I know. I know. But we're not safe yet. I need you to stay sharp. Lena nodded, forcing her hands to stop shaking. She retrieved the pistol, checked the magazine like she'd been trained. 12 rounds left, enough to survive, or enough to die trying. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Lena's life. They heard fighting throughout the villa, shouts, gunfire, the crash of furniture breaking. The security feeds showed Vittorio's guards methodically clearing rooms, hunting the remaining attackers. And then finally, mercifully, Vittorio's voice came through Marco's radio. All clear. Threats neutralized. Status on Lena? Marco keyed the mic. She's safe. We had one breach. She handled it. A pause, then. Bring her to me. Medical wing. The medical wing was chaos. Injured guards receiving treatment, doctors working with swift efficiency, blood on pristine floors. Vittorio stood in the center of it all, shirt torn, face grim, a cut above his left eye that someone had already bandaged. When he saw Lena, relief transformed his expression. He crossed to her in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. "You're okay," he said against her hair. Not a question, a prayer. "I killed someone." Lena's voice sounded strange in her own ears. "One of the attackers, he was going to shoot." "I know, Marco told me." Vittorio pulled back just enough to look at her. "How do you feel?" "I don't know. Scared, sick, grateful to be alive." "That's normal. The shock will fade, the guilt might not." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But you did what you had to do. You protected innocent people. That matters." "Does it get easier?" "No, but you learn to live with it." Around them, the organized chaos continued. Lena counted 3 dead attackers, 6 captured, unknown numbers killed outside the villa proper. "Volkov sent 17 men," Vittorio said, following her gaze. "We eliminated or captured all of them. He underestimated our defenses. Will he try again?" "Not after this." This was his best shot, and he failed spectacularly. Vittorio's expression hardened. "Now it's my turn." Over the next 3 days, Lena watched her husband dismantle Dmitry Volkov's empire with surgical precision. She sat in on meetings where Vittorio offered Volkov's lieutenants better terms to switch allegiances, watched him leverage connections with politicians to freeze Volkov's accounts, listened as he orchestrated a campaign that left the Russians scrambling to survive. "You're not killing him," Lena observed on the 3rd night. "No." "Why not? He tried to kill you." "Because death is easy. What I'm doing is worse. I'm destroying everything he built, making him powerless, forcing him to watch as his empire crumbles." Vittorio poured himself whiskey, offered her wine. "By the time I'm finished, Dmitry Volkov will be lucky to manage a corner store in Siberia." "That's cruel." "That's justice, in my world." Lena accepted the wine, considered his words. "Do you ever worry about becoming the monster everyone thinks you are?" "Every day. But then I remember that monsters don't lie awake at night questioning their choices." He settled beside her on the couch. "They don't marry women they could easily control and then give them weapons and autonomy. They don't fall in love with their purchased brides." The words hung between them, dangerous and true. Vittorio set down his glass. "Is that what's happening here?" "I think it might be, for both of us." "That's terrifying." "Yes." Lena turned to face him fully. "But also the most real thing I've ever felt. This marriage started as a transaction, but it's become something else, something I choose, something I want. Even knowing what I am, what I've done, especially knowing that, because you've never lied to me about who you are. You've never pretended to be something you're not." She took his hand. "I'm not in love with an illusion, Vittorio. I'm in love with a complicated, dangerous, surprisingly honorable man who bought me to save his own skin and then gave me the tools to save my own." Vittorio pulled her into his lap, held her like she might disappear if he loosened his grip. "I love you. I've probably loved you since you demanded contract terms before agreeing to marry me. I just didn't know what to do with it. You could start by kissing me." He did. And for the first time, there was no hesitation between them. No walls. No careful distance. Just 2 people choosing each other against all odds. They made love that night with the desperation of people who'd almost lost everything. Lena discovered that Vittorio was patient despite his power, generous despite his control, tender in ways that contradicted everything she'd feared about him. And in the aftermath, wrapped in sheets and each other, she finally felt free. Not free from him. Free with him. Free to choose this life, this man, this impossible love. The next morning brought news that changed everything again. Lena woke feeling strange, nauseous, exhausted, her body not quite her own. She made it to the bathroom just in time, Vittorio holding her hair back as she was violently sick. "Should I call a doctor?" he asked, concerned. "No, I think I know what this is." Understanding dawned in his eyes. Are you sure? Not completely, but all the signs are there. The pregnancy test confirmed it 3 hours later. Positive. Undeniably, unmistakably positive. Lena stared at the little plastic stick, mind racing through implications she wasn't ready to process. She was pregnant, with Vittorio Salazar's child. The transaction that began their marriage had created something infinitely more permanent. How do you feel? Vittorio asked carefully. Terrified, excited, completely unprepared. Lena met his eyes. How do you feel? The same, except add ancient to that list. I'm going to be 70 when this child graduates high school. Despite everything, Lena laughed. You'll be a distinguished 70. I'll be a tired 70. But joy transformed his face, making him look years younger. A father. After all this time, I'm going to be a father again. Again? Vittorio's expression clouded. I had a son. Long ago. He died when he was 6. Complications from pneumonia that we couldn't treat fast enough. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I don't talk about it. But you should know. You should know that I've loved and lost before, that being a father terrifies me because I remember how much it hurts when... Lena kissed him, stopping the words before they could form. This is different. We're different, and we'll protect this child with everything we have. Everything I have is built on violence. Then we'll change it. Build something legitimate. Something our child can inherit without inheriting your enemies. Vittorio studied her face. You mean that? Completely. I'm not raising a child in a world where car bombs and assassination attempts are normal. We build something better, together. Over the following months, Lena watched Vittorio transform his empire. He began divesting from the criminal enterprises that had built his fortune, selling off operations, severing ties with dangerous partners, reinvesting in legitimate businesses. Shipping companies, real estate, renewable energy, clean money replacing dirty. It was slow, dangerous work. Some partners resisted. Others tried to exploit the transition. But Vittorio handled each challenge with the same ruthless efficiency he'd always shown, just channeled toward different ends. And Lena stood beside him through all of it, not as decoration, not as leverage, but as his partner, his confidant, his equal in building their new life. She was 5 months pregnant when they held the meeting that sealed their future. Vittorio's remaining partners gathered in the villa's dining room, men who'd worked with him for decades, who'd profited from his leadership, who now faced a choice. I'm stepping back from active operations, Vittorio announced. Marco will assume day-to-day control of remaining ventures. I'm maintaining advisory capacity only. Silence greeted this proclamation. Finally, one of the older men spoke. You're retiring? Because of the girl? Because of my wife, Vittorio corrected, steel in his voice. Because I'm about to become a father, because I've spent 40 years building an empire through violence, and I'm choosing to spend the next 40 building a family through different means. That's weakness. That's evolution. Anyone who can't accept it is welcome to leave, immediately. 3 men stood and walked out. The rest remained. Good, Vittorio said. Now, let's discuss the future. Lena listened as her husband systematically restructured his entire operation, eliminating vulnerabilities, strengthening legitimate holdings, creating distance between their family and the violence that had defined his past. It was masterful, strategic, and utterly committed to protecting the life growing inside her. Their daughter was born on a warm spring evening as sunset painted the Italian countryside gold. Labor was brutal, 16 hours of pain that made Lena understand why people screamed. But Vittorio never left her side, holding her hand through contractions, whispering encouragement in Italian she was too exhausted to translate but understood in her bones. And then finally, mercifully, a sharp cry filled the delivery room. A girl, the doctor announced, placing a squirming, perfect bundle into Lena's arms. Congratulations. Lena stared at her daughter, dark hair, tiny fists, eyes that hadn't decided their color yet, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. This was why she'd survived, why she'd adapted, why she'd chosen to transform captivity into love for her. She's perfect, Vittorio whispered, touching their daughter's tiny hand with fingers that had killed and built empires and now trembled with tenderness. Absolutely perfect. What should we name her? They discussed options but never settled on anything definite. Sofia, Vittorio said. After my mother, if you agree. Sofia Salazar. Lena tested the name, smiled. It's beautiful. They brought Sofia home to a villa transformed by joy instead of fear. Guards still patrolled the grounds, but now they smiled at the baby carriage. Signora Carrara hovered like a devoted grandmother. Marco visited weekly, utterly smitten with his tiny cousin. And Lena discovered that motherhood suited her in ways she never expected. She was fierce about Sofia's safety, sharp about her daughter's needs, utterly committed to giving this child the stability and love Lena herself had lost when her mother died. Vittorio was equally transformed. The man who'd commanded criminal empires with iron control became putty in his daughter's tiny hands. He paced with her at 3 a.m. when she wouldn't sleep, changed diapers without complaint, read to her in Italian before bed, even though she was too young to understand. You're besotted, Lena teased one evening, watching him cradle Sofia against his chest. Completely, pathetically. She owns me more thoroughly than any enemy ever could. Good. She should know her power early. 6 months after Sofia's birth, Lena confronted the last piece of unfinished business. Her father had been released from prison after serving reduced time. His cooperation with authorities had been minimal. He'd given them nothing useful about Vittorio, honoring the one decent thing he'd done in years. He'd written letters. Lena had burned them unread. But now, holding her daughter, she understood something about family and forgiveness that had eluded her before. I need to see him, she told Vittorio. One last time. Are you sure? No, but I need to close that chapter, for me, for Sofia, so she never has to wonder why her mother couldn't forgive her grandfather. They met in a cafe in Boston, neutral territory, far from both their current lives. Michael Whitmore looked smaller than Lena remembered, grayer, beaten down by consequences he'd spent years running from. Lena, he said, standing awkwardly when she approached. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. She stayed standing, keeping her distance. Say what you need to say. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, doesn't undo what I did, but I need you to know that I'm sorry, that I've regretted every day since Rome, that if I could go back, you can't. And apologies don't change the past. Lena's voice was steady, emotionless. You sold me to save yourself. You destroyed my trust, my innocence, my sense of safety in the world. I know. But, she paused, collecting thoughts she'd practiced but never expected to speak. You also inadvertently gave me the greatest gift of my life, because being forced to marry Vittorio, being thrown into that world, made me stronger than I ever would have become otherwise. It gave me purpose. Love. A daughter who will never doubt that she's wanted. Michael's eyes filled with tears. You have a child? I do, Sofia. She's beautiful and perfect and will never know you. Lena, please. No, that's the consequence of your choices. You don't get access to my family. You don't get redemption through my daughter. You don't get to rebuild what you destroyed. Lena's voice softened slightly. But I'm choosing to forgive you anyway. Not for you. For me. So I can move forward without carrying this anger. Does that mean? It means I forgive you. It doesn't mean I forget. It doesn't mean we have a relationship. It just means I'm releasing the hold this has on me. She turned to leave. Goodbye, Dad. I hope you build a better life than the one you destroyed. She walked away without looking back, feeling lighter with each step. Outside, Vittorio waited with Sofia in his arms. How do you feel? He asked. Free? Actually, genuinely free. He kissed her forehead, careful not to jostle the baby. Good. Let's go home. Home. The word had changed meaning over the past 2 years. It wasn't Boston anymore, wasn't the cramped apartment or the coffee shop job or the life she'd thought she wanted. Home was a villa in the Italian countryside. Home was the man who'd bought her freedom by stealing it and then given it back by earning her love. Home was the daughter sleeping peacefully against her father's chest. Home was the life she'd built from ashes and impossibility. 2 years later, they held a second wedding ceremony. Not because they needed to be married, they'd been married since that first ceremony in the villa chapel. but because Lena wanted to choose it, publicly, deliberately, with joy instead of resignation. The ceremony was small. Close friends, trusted associates, Marco standing as witness, Sophia toddling between guests in a white dress that matched her mother's. This time Lena chose every detail. The flowers, the music, the vows. When Vittorio slid a new ring onto her finger, emeralds this time, her birthstone, tears streamed down her face. "I choose you," she said, voice breaking with emotion. "Not because I have to, not because I'm trapped, but because you're my partner, my love, my home. I choose you, Vittorio Salazar, today and every day after." "I choose you," Vittorio answered, his own eyes bright. "Not because I bought you, not because circumstances forced us together, but because you transformed my life in ways I never thought possible. You made me believe in redemption, in love, in building instead of destroying. I choose you, Lena, for whatever time we have left." They kissed as husband and wife for the second time, but the first time it truly meant everything. The celebration lasted into the evening. Sophia fell asleep in Marco's arms. Guards who'd protected them through assassination attempts smiled at the dancing. Signora Carraro wept with joy. And Lena realized that the impossible had become inevitable. She loved this life, this man, this family they'd built from the worst possible beginning. 5 years later, their son was born. They named him Michael, after Lena's father, because forgiveness meant honoring the complicated truth of where she'd come from. Vittorio was 74 when he held his son for the first time, silver hair and laugh lines and hands that shook slightly with age, but still held the baby with absolute certainty. "2 children," he marveled. "I never imagined." "You deserve this," Lena said. "You deserve happiness after everything." "So do you." They'd built something remarkable together. Vittorio had almost completely divested from criminal enterprises, reinvesting in legitimate businesses that would support their family for generations. He'd established a foundation helping children trapped in poverty, paying forward the second chance he'd given himself through Lena. And Lena had discovered her own purpose. She'd finished her university degree, studying literature and history. Now she wrote stories about second chances, about women finding strength in impossible situations, about love growing in the darkest soil. Her first novel was published when Michael was 2. It became a bestseller. Critics called it hauntingly authentic. Readers praised its emotional honesty. No one knew it was based on her own life. That truth was theirs alone to keep. One evening, when Sophia was 8 and Michael was 5, they sat together on the terrace overlooking the gardens. The children played in the fading light, their laughter carrying on the warm air. Vittorio took Lena's hand, laced their fingers together. "If you could change how this began," he asked quietly, "would you?" It was the question that had haunted them both, the impossible hypothetical. Lena looked at their children, at the life they'd built, at the man who'd forced her into marriage and then spent years earning her love. "I hate the way it started," she said finally. "I hate that my father's weakness brought us together. I hate that you felt buying me was the solution. I hate that I didn't have a real choice. But I love where it led. I love who we became. I love these children and this life, and even the scars we collected getting here." She turned to face him. "If I change the beginning, I might lose all of this. So no, I wouldn't change it. I'd just hold on to the ending more tightly." Vittorio kissed her hand. "That's all any of us can do. Hold on to what we've built and protect it with everything we have." "Is that what you're doing? Still protecting us?" "Always. Until my last breath." He lived another 20 years, long enough to see Sophia graduate university with honors, long enough to walk her down the aisle at her own wedding to a man who loved her fiercely and treated her as an equal, long enough to watch Michael choose medicine over business, becoming a doctor who treated patients in underserved communities, long enough to hold 3 grandchildren and tell them stories about transformation and second chances, long enough to tell Lena, on a quiet morning in their bedroom with sun streaming through the windows, that she'd been the greatest adventure of his life. And then, peacefully, with Lena holding his hand, Vittorio Salazar closed his eyes and let go. Lena grieved him with the same fierce intensity she'd loved him. The foundation expanded in his name. His children honored his memory by continuing the legitimate work he'd started. and Lena kept writing, kept telling stories about complicated love and impossible choices and the ways people transform each other. She never remarried, never wanted to. Vittorio had been her great love, the man who'd stolen her freedom and then given her a different, better kind. She lived to 93, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried forward the legacy of transformation she and Vittorio had begun. And on her last day, in the villa that had been both her prison and her palace, Lena looked at the portrait of Vittorio that hung in their bedroom and smiled. "I chose you," she whispered, "every day, until the end." Then she closed her eyes and went to find him. Because some love stories begin with force and end with choice. Some marriages start as transactions and become transformations. And some prisons, when built with unexpected love, become the freest places we'll ever know.